Hey everyone, got Joe Glines here and my colleague Jackie, and actually John. I think now as he's been presenting at several today. He's presenting again at this one with the SQLite stuff. So thank you again for that, John. I'm over in Dallas, Texas, and we're talking to you about how to use AutoHotkey today. I'm, as I always say, I'm not a programmer, but I pretend to play one on TV apparently. Um, and Jackie, you want to say anything?
I'm in Denmark, and I'm also very grateful for Sean actually being on here presenting SQLite. So yeah, that's great.
Cool. And then Jean, we'll have you tell your little spiel here in a bit.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So let me get to the next slide here. There's roughly 17 of us registered. As I think you all know, we start off muted just because we don't want everyone talking over each other. But if you have a question, you can either raise your hand or just type in the chat, and then one of us will, especially because when the person talking, they're focused on that. I or Jackie will watch the chat, and then we'll intermix your question when John, when he has a break in his train of thought or whatever as it flows. This one, I think it's to me, it's a pretty cool. When you have the need, it's a pretty cool ability to be able to have to connect to a SQL database and store your stuff and extract what you want and everything. So and we'll have a couple examples of how we've used it to help stimulate, give you ideas on how you can use it. So let's go ahead. We're going to move forward here a little. So this one's a little different. We have some announcements. So next month's webinar, I want to tell you guys, because I'd like you guys to try and recruit. You have friends and colleagues, right? You guys have all been using AutoHotkey now for a while. I recognize most of the people on here. But if you know people who haven't started using AutoHotkey yet, or they've just barely gotten started, right? Next month, which is what Jackie and I have talked about this for, I think, a couple years now, of when are we going to have this webinar where we have a really noob level of just introduction to it. What is AutoHotkey? How is it different than other scripting languages? How do you install it? Have a basically default editor, and then do some simple stuff. And so we'd appreciate your help if you want to invite other people, sign them up, and then of course we'll have it recorded so people can watch it later. But I think that Q&A is what would be really helpful for a lot of people. They can do live. And then the second thing is that Jackie and I we've been doing these. We call them quick chats, but sometimes they're not so quick. But we've been working on them for a while, for I'd say a little bit over a month now. And what we wanted to do is we're going to have weekly posts and share them on topics. And what we did was for the most part, I think everyone, Jackie, if I remember right, I think maybe once we've referred to something on the screen, but for the most part, they're really more about audio. That's not, you don't have to watch the video to understand and follow. So they're much more into a podcast type format. And actually, if anyone here in the chat, if you could say if you'd have a preference, whether that you'd have them video versus an MP3, as long as you're not missing out on anything on the MP3 because we're not sharing, if there's nothing in the video. Which format would you rather have them in? Right now, just because it's easy, and I have a channel where people already subscribe to stuff. We were going to put them on YouTube as well, but we could convert them to MP3 files and have them where people can play them. And so we're just curious. Do you think? Oh, okay, I see some MP3 is good. Okay, so it looks like we'll make them available in both. Right, because we've already got them on YouTube, so it's fine. And then we can figure out a way that actually, if anyone here knows of a free site for hosting the podcasts, then ping us with that, because that would be nice to know. Don was actually mentioning a way he knows how you can basically, I think he said, using XML and structure it in a way, put them on your server, and then people can sync to it. But I was thinking more of a destination that most people go to, where it'd be a little more structured on the files and everything, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I'd say, again, with the system in my car, at least, I use my phone, the Bluetooth, and I use YouTube just fine to play whatever. You don't need to actually view the screen. So, yeah.
Yeah, I actually just switched over. I bought, because I have an old car, but I have an FM it's a radio, so I have it's Bluetooth to my phone, and then it uses an FM station to connect to my car stereo. And so I've been switching over to using my phone now in my car, and it's really nice because I can have everything on my phone, and then actually if I get a phone call, my audio stops from the playing anyway. So it's pretty cool and cheap, really inexpensive. But anyway, yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's get moving forward here. So first off, today, instead of having an actual script highlight, I just wanted to point you to a website. The Scrommel, I don't know what's with PowerPoint. You can never actually click it in this view, but let me go here. If you haven't ever been here, the Scrommel's tutorials, or I shouldn't say that, they're like little snippets of code. Let's go to the downloads. He has, I think it was 116. Let me make all of them available. So these are all AutoHotkey scripts that when you go through and just read like what they do, and then when you like it, let's see, actually I think you focus in here, it'll tell you a little more about it, and then you can download either the AutoHotkey or the executable. But what's cool is, especially with the AutoHotkey code, you can examine the code, and it's usually very concise. It's not thousands of lines of code, right? It's usually a dozen lines, if that. So there are minutia bits of things, and you can help learn little bits of, here's how I can control these types of things. I originally studied a lot of these, and I would go back in time and say, like, I'm trying to do this, and I think he has something that does something like it, and then you basically borrow from it and adapt it to your need. But I didn't want to, there's so many to choose from, right? I didn't go into any one of them, but there's a lot of cool stuff that you can use here. And he, by the way, you can donate to him, as like a lot of our stuff. You can donate if you feel the need that you get some value out of his stuff. Here's a PayPal link. I actually sent him an email too, seeing if he would host a webinar or co-host, right, and talk about what he has available and how he's done it and stuff. So we'll see if he is interested in that. But cool. So that's that. Has anyone here used anything from Scrommel or seen it? I know Jackie and I talked about it years ago at one point. I think we actually talked about it in a webinar at one point, but it wasn't a big focus.
Yeah, I'd say at one point I used a few of his, not because I actually used them, but I used them as learning tools.
Yeah.
Because it's so structured, and if you wanted to do something specific, you can actually get the source code from here. So yeah, it's a good way to learn small nifty things without having to ask. And I didn't ask much in the beginning, so it can be a great resource in many ways. If you just want the functionality, you can download that. Or if you want to learn how to do it in one specific way, then you can do that as well.
Yeah, and he has a lot. I mean, they cover a lot of different areas, especially things that I wouldn't have thought AutoHotkey. This would actually open my eyes to how tightly AutoHotkey can interact with Windows, because you can control programs, and hide like calculator buttons or group them together and just structure them in a way that you wouldn't think you'd be able to do something like that, but he makes it very easy. So yeah, it's a cool site that has some good examples.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on now. Jean, and anyone on this has probably seen it already, but John has one of his tools is this quick access pop-up, and I use it all the time. It's this menu system here where you can build menus and submenus and have shortcuts to folders and stuff. Here's a link to it. But John, why don't you start? I'm going to stop sharing and go ahead and start sharing. And
yeah, I'll start sharing this page.
Great.
So, hello everybody. I'm Jean Lamar. I'm based in Montreal. Already in the snow. We have early winter this year, so it's already white everywhere outside. I'm French speaking. I'm from Montreal, so my English sometimes I have to look for my words, but help me maybe sometimes if I talk in a word not coming in. I'm hobbyist programmer for years, so I know quite a lot of different languages, and I'm using AutoHotkey for maybe 10 years now, and more seriously for the last 4 or 5 years when I started developing a quick access pop-up that was named folders pop-up in its first version. And I'm still improving this tool because there's a good response. There's people every day sending me emails or asking for support or giving suggestions to improve the tool. So it gives me good ideas to continue working on it. And one of the last ideas I received, and it was while talking with Joe, it was to add a menu in this. In fact, quick access pop-up, I won't show it, but just want to tell you that it's a tool that a pop-up menu that you can pop up anywhere on any window and launch folders, files, documents, applications, URLs, snippets of text. You can create hotkeys, you can create hot strings, so there's a very flexible tool. And one of the things that we were talking, Joe and me, is to add a menu of the folders or the files that you use the most frequently. And there's a way to monitor in Windows recent items, what you currently use. And I developed a background task that monitors every minute what you use in the last minute and add it to a database that can be used then to sort what are the most used files or folders in the last 7 days or 30 days, depending on the configuration or what you wish. But to do that, I needed a good engine to process the data, because before that I was only using a text file, an ini file, windows.ini file to save the configuration, to save your setting, your menu, all this. But saving more important quantity of data in this kind of file would not be fast enough to produce a menu that would compile what are the most frequently used or frequently found items in this database. So that's why I looked at SQLite. I've used it a little bit before just to solve this short-term issues, so I haven't really explored that at that time. But now to do it, it was maybe 6 months ago. I really go inside to learn more about that. So I'm not an expert in SQL. I know how to make some basic queries, and I can find a way to do what I need, but I'm not an expert. So I can explain to you what you need to do if you want to use SQLite, what you have to install on your system, and then to show you the main. And there's a very good library that has been developed by Just Me. It's a nickname on the AutoHotkey forum. And so using this library is very easy in AutoHotkey to open a database, to query the database, to add data to the database. So that's what I can show you today. You can ask questions at any time. I'm not sure I will always be able to reply. Maybe other members of this chat will be able also to jump in if they have answers. And Joe or Jack can monitor the chat if you have a question at any time. Sounds good? Okay, so what you need first, you need to have a binary file, a DLL file that is the SQLite engine. You have to download it on the SQLite.org website. I will just go through this page on PowerPoint, then I'll switch to my browser to show you these pages. So on the SQLite, there's a section for downloads, and then you download a precompiled binary files for Windows. In fact, it's 2 files, SQLite3.dll and SQLite3.def, and you need to have these 2 files in the folder where you run your script, basically. You can download a 32-bit or 64-bit of these version of these files, depending on the system you have. And I'll show you the documentation for SQLite for those who want to learn about doing queries with SQL. So it's the first thing you need. Second thing you need is the library that is on the AutoHotkey forum. I'll show you the page. And then there's also a utility that is very interesting to have, because it allows you to look at the content of a database without using AutoHotkey, just to check what you've done in AutoHotkey, how it looks, if it's okay, if it's well saved in the database. So that's named DB Browser for SQL. There are probably other good tools to browse a SQLite database, but I use this one. It's free and it's working very well. So I'll switch to my browser just to show you these pages. So here you have the SQL.org website. From the home page, you go to download the executable. And what you're looking for is precompiled for Windows. So that's here. And you have this file here if you are a 32-bit system, or this file on a 64-bit system. This one I didn't use. This, I think it seems to install a lot of tools, but all you need, in fact, is 2 files, and they are found inside these 2 zip files. So you extract the files and you put them in the folder where you run your script. Okay, for the first part, I'll send you the. I can do it right now. Sending you the link to a zip file containing my presentation and these links. Where is it? Here. Okay, so in this the zip file that I put on the chat, you have my deck. It's a 2 pages deck, not a very long deck, but you have my example file. So the three scripts that I will use to show you how to use it. So that's for the SQL runtime, the DLL file. Here you have on the AutoHotkey forum. There's a link in my page to go to this discussion here, this thread from Just Me. Someone, I don't know his real name, is from Germany, is very active. It's a long-time user on the AutoHotkey forum. And he made this, this library that you have here and that you can download from GitHub. There's a zip file that you can download and extract his library and a sample file that you can also use. And you could look at the source if you wish on GitHub, but it's already here on the forum. What you will have more if you download this file here is the sample file, which is very good to look at. Then that is GitHub page, and here is the page, the website for SQLite browser, SQLitebrowser.org. You download the 32 or 64-bit Windows file here, and it's a portable application. You just, I think, if I remember well, you just unzip and it's ready to use. Not sure, maybe it's a setup file.
Just to jump in here real quickly to make sure people understand. This is just a little different of like, hey, after you create your database file, this tool will allow you to peek inside it and actually look at it. It's not an AutoHotkey thing. It's not required, but it is very convenient to have to just look at it. Right.
Yeah, yeah. You really need something like this because you can program something in AutoHotkey and you don't know if it works if you cannot go inside the database to look at it. So it's a very mandatory tool. This one or an alternative tool if you have others. Okay, excuse me. So just let's switch back here. Okay, switching back to my deck. So what I will show you is, first, I'll use a first example, a very simple script, and we'll go through this script line by line. I'll switch to my editor right after, which we will see with this, the basics, or what the basics that you need. Then I have a file that I call the Beatles script because it imports a text file with Beatles songs, 257 or songs in a text file. And so this script here will create a new database, create a table, create indexes, and insert the lines from the text file, so a way to import data from a text file to your database. And then we'll see various commands. After that, depending on the time we have, we can talk about using SQLite to manage binary content, so images, sounds, things like that. I haven't really used it, so I can just show you the sample from just me, and maybe some other users use it and can talk about that. And there's also some more advanced features. SQLite is a transactional database, so you can use it to make, for example, transaction where you have to make sure that everything goes well until the end before committing your changes. And if something goes wrong, you can roll back to what it was before you started doing something. So it's a very powerful tool. You don't necessarily need to use these features, but they are there, and we can talk about that a little bit if you wish again. Okay? Okay. So let's go to my editor. So it's a site. You see my editor here. Is it large enough?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So I have 1, 2, 3. I have 6 tabs here. The first one is the first example we look at. The second one is the Beatles. Here's the binary sample. Here you have the class itself. So what Just Me did and that we use to query the database. In fact, there's very low-level commands with addresses and DLL calls and things like that. It's a class, so it's quite easy to use. And it is here the sample file that Just Me did. It's very basic, but it gives an idea of what you can do. With this, and when the example I will give it to you, you will have 3 or 4 with the binary one, 3 examples of script that you can use. And I just put my quick access pop-up source file here in case I want to check something that I've done in quick access pop-up with SQLite. So in this first one here, so first you need to include the class, the Just Me class. In my case, it is in just a folder. I'm using a relative link here to this file. And I'll show you when you use the zip file, when you unzip the zip file, what is the structure of my file. I'll just switch again here. Okay. So in the zip file that I sent you, there's the first example folder is where you have the script, and you have the 2 SQLite files that you have to install that has to be in the same folder where you have your script. And the library is here, the class is here in this folder. So this is this file that we are calling from the script. And in the other example, for example, in the Beatles example, instead of putting the DLL file as again, I put an ini file that is telling the script where the DLL file is. So you don't, if you have multiple scripts using the DLL, the SQLite 3 DLL file, you can have only one place and have an ini file that I can show you the content, but so that's the ini file here, and you have to put DLL file and then the path to the file. That's good? Okay, now switching back to the first script. So that's where we include the class. Then what you have to do is create an object that will be create an instance of the class. So new SQL DB class. And this object here, obj, I always prefix my variable with something that tells if it is a string, an integer, or an object. So that's why it always starts with obj, in this case, database. And then the file that will be my example will be in the current script folder and will be named first example.db. Just for the script, I'm copying a master because if I run it multiple times, I will just start from the same copy that I had at the beginning. So the first command here from the class is this one here. It's open DB, open database. You have to tell it where is this database, or the path to the database file. And these are two optional parameters. The first one is to tell that I want to write to the database. It is there by default, so I wouldn't need to put it. But if you put R instead, you will open the database in read mode. So there will be no danger that you will modify the content if all you need is to read. And if you only read, the database will not be locked. So it could be used by two scripts at the same time reading the database, because there's no locking when you're just reading the file. And the 0 here is to tell that if the database does not exist, it will not create it. It needs to be there. If you put 1 here, it means that if the database does not exist, it will be created as an empty database. That's what we'll do in the Beatles script later. So here there's an if. If it does not open correctly, then it gives an error message. It's very important to put error messages everywhere you put calls to this class, because it never worked the first time. So there's always an error, and you need to know what went wrong. So that's the message box here is giving what is the error, what is the message that the class will return a message if it goes wrong. So there's an error message, an error code, and I'm adding some information that will, for example, when it is a query, I will put the query. In this case here, I'm putting the name of the file. So if it goes wrong, I will know probably it's wrong because the file name is wrong here. So for now, it will work correctly. All the rest is commented here, so I'll just reveal this later. But if I run this, what it will do, it will just open the database and close the database. That's the last command here. If you close your script, if your scripts end, it will automatically close the database. But it's a good practice to have the command there. If you have something else running in your script, then you can close the database, and it will release the lock that could be put on this database if you want to open it with something else. So what I will do here first, I will just move the command. So we will run here a first command that is a query that will query the table in this first example database. This command is here. I will run it just for you to see what's in it. So there are 3 rows in my database with 2 fields, the first name and an email address. Okay. I can switch to the file, the database file, to show you the database from here.
Yeah, I just wish you had a tool that would jump you to that folder. Like maybe we should make a tool like that.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just yeah, here it is. SQLite.
So again, for people who aren't, used to this stuff, he's just using this external tool to show you what's in the database, the tables and data.
Yeah, and you see here the table. There's one table, it's named list, and it contains 2 columns and 3 lines. Very, very short database. So what you do here to query the database, you create a query string. In this case, it says select everything from the table list. And then you pass this command to a method called query. So it's object database query with the query the SQL query select everything. And what the class will do, it will put the result in a record set. So this variable here is what will.
We're not seeing.
Oh yeah, I forgot to switch back.
That's right. Yeah.
There we go. So we are in the command, in the section here that will query the table. We have the SQL statement here, select everything from list. And we pass this to a command called query, where we give the SQL string. And here, the variable that will contain the result of the query. That is this variable that we will use later to show the content. Again, if it goes wrong here, there's a message box that is telling why. And then we have a loop. And what this loop is doing, it is, the first thing it does, it's looping inside the record set. The record set has 3 rows, 3 lines. So it will first go to the first line using the next command. The next command is, at the beginning, it's at line 0, if you wish. Then next will take you to line 1, and it will put the content of line 1 in another object that is called row. So this object contains, in fact, it's an array that contains the 3 fields of the first row. If the result of this here is telling me if I am at the end of the table. If the result is 0, it means that we are at the end. And then, no, it means that there was an error, excuse me. If the result is -1, it means that it is the end. So if the result is 1, 2, 3, 4, it means that something went wrong. If it's, if it's, no, if it is 0, it went wrong. If it is -1, it is the end of file. And I'm not sure if it returns a number of lines, maybe, but if it is a positive number, then it means that it is okay. And in this record set variable here, you have a property that will tell you the number of columns. So we can here do a second loop, a loop inside the loop that will go into the 3 columns of this first line. And what it does, it will just concatenate here with a tab what is the first content and the second. There are 2 columns, in fact. So the first one here will be for the first name, and then in the second iteration of this loop, it will take the email address, put an enter at the end of this first line, and repeat this until we are at the end of the file, at the end of the table. So we have 3 lines. When we are finished, we have a message box here that shows this result. Here, you see it? You see the result?
Something flashed up there, but it disappeared.
Yeah, okay. I will just share my old screen.
Okay, there we go.
A little messy, a little more messy, and maybe smaller. But you see here. Should I change my resolution to make it bigger?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I run this, I have this command here that will show the 3 lines that has been built during this loop here. There's one other command here, object record set.free. It's very important to use it if you are working in something that will loop frequently, that will repeat in a background task. In fact, in the first version of Quick Access Pop-Up, I had a task running every minute, collecting some information, and there was one record set that I forgot to use the free command. So for users who were running my application for a few days, this created a memory leak because after some time, a small amount of memory, but every minute for a few days, it got to be a problem. So I fixed it. So it's really important to free the memory that is taken by the record set that is created. In fact, it is created here when you query the database. So that's the first example. So you build a query. Here I could change it to say I will query only what are the column names. I will query only the name instead of the O. Let me write it correctly. And now I just have the first column. I could use the where clause to restrict it. So we'll play more with these various commands when we'll be in the Beatles file because it's a bigger file and more interesting to play with filters and things like that in that file. Are we okay until here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So going back here, so we have this first example, which is query the table. The second example that I'll show you is instead of using a command called query, we will use a command get table. What this command is doing is basically the same thing, but instead of having to move from one row to the other, the class will return all the content in your query in one object, and then you can play with this object. So it's very similar at the end. The end result is quite the same, but in some case you will have advantages of having everything available in your variable, not having to return to the database every time you want to change row. But if your result is very big, if you have a very large table, it could use a lot of memory maybe to do it that way. So what you have to do is to build your query. I've done quite the same, select everything from this. Here I just use the order statement just to make a little change, but it could be the same thing. And then we pass this command here to the get table method. And as an object here, it is a table object that will be returned by this command. And the table will contain every rows and every columns of the result of your query. Again, the error message here. And then there's a property that says as names from the table. So it means if the table has named columns, and in fact, it's a way to just make sure that the result is good, that there is a result from your query. And if yes, then you can loop inside every rows of the table. So we're looping here for a number of times that will be, we already know how many rows we have in this table. In the first example here, we didn't know how many rows we had. We had to go until we get to the end. Here, we already know how many rows we have. And for each row, we loop inside a row to concatenate the object column, the object table with the column names 1 and the column name 2. No, the index is this? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you're associating.
I'll show the result and we see. So what it does here, it says for the name Bob and for the email Bob at this address. So the first here is the name of the field. So that's what we get here.
Yep.
Column names of the row number 1. And here the column names of the column number 1. Excuse me, we'll get to it. So here we have the name, we have the word name, in fact, and then column, and right after we have the name of the first row. So the first time we are on row 1 and column 1. So that's where we get name, column, Bob. When we do the second column, we get email, column, bob at email.com. So that's what we get in these two iteration because we have 2 columns. Then we repeat it 3 times and we have our 3 records here, our 3 lines for Bob, Jean, and Joe. All this being in this report string that I'm showing here with the get table result. Is it clear enough?
I think so.
Yeah. So that's
kind of this might be a structure thing that I'm actually asking about, but it might be me not getting it. So the object table, we are looping over the row count.
Yeah, we're looping a number of times. That is the number of rows.
Yeah, and then in there we then loop the number of columns. Okay, and then
here we remember what is the current row, because the A index value will change when we get inside the second loop. We have a loop inside a loop. So, so the A index here is for the column count, and the intro is for the row count.
Okay. Fair enough.
That's good?
Yeah.
And that's where, for me, that how you use the int row in your row 93, like that's, notice it's on the second half, but not the first one, right? So the first one, you're sticking with the header each time, and then you're appending it to the row.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, here we have the same value for every line because it's always the same column name. But here we have a variable. In fact, it's an array of arrays. Okay, we have a table here. A table is one line with multiple. So one array is one line, another array the second line, multiple arrays with the same structure. So that's why we can get here to line 1, column 1, line 1, column 2, line 2, column 1, line 2, column 3, column 2, etc. Okay, that's an array of arrays. That's why it's called a table.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Cool.
Okay. Good.
Oh, I have one quick question though.
Yeah.
Could you have used like a for loop on this instead of using this type of loop?
Yes. I haven't tried it.
Okay.
It's
fine. I was just
probably. I haven't tried it.
Yeah,
So getting back to
the class is returning AutoHotkey objects, right?
Okay.
So when you actually go in and say object row count, I'm not sure if it's actually an object or if it's a raw number.
I'm not sure if you use it will return the column name. In fact, in the for loop, you have the name and the value, So I'm not sure if it returns that. I remember I tried. I just don't remember if it was successful because I stick to this technique that is very easy to use.
Cool.
Okay. So that's the first thing we've done here was to query the table. Then we get the full table. Third thing I will show you here is how you can insert values in this table. So we'll execute the exec insert, and then we'll get the table to see the result. To insert, what you have to do is to build your insert command. So you need to know SQL syntax to build your insert command. So it says insert into the table list, into the variable or the column name and the column email, the values bill and bill@email.com. So in addition to Bob, Jean, and Joe, we'll have a fourth row with bill. So we send this to the database using the exec method. So that's the third method we see. The first one is to send a query. The second one is to get a table. And the third one is to send just a command that will be executed by the database. There's no real result coming from it. There is just if it went well or not by the error code that you may receive, it goes wrong. So for example, if I put here a table that does not exist, I will receive an error message that says there's no such table as list XXX, error code number 1, and my query is here.
Yeah.
Okay?
If you instead of list used where you have name and email,
yeah,
could you use index numbers instead, like list
maybe
1,
don't know.
2, or
Don't know. 1, you mean 1 for the first column, 2 for the second one?
yeah, or 0 and 1 or whatever.
I never tried it, so I'll just try it. So if it's just 1, no, maybe it's. I didn't know you could use numbers.
Yeah, you probably couldn't. It didn't seem like it worked.
Yeah, maybe. So maybe it worked with other SQL database and not this one, or maybe it's a syntax thing that has to use quotes, or I don't know. But here you just have to insert the name of the columns. And then for the values, you have to, so there are 2 columns here. You have to enter 2 values inside a value section here, and to use the quote to enclose every value.
Yeah,
If you
and
put a quote inside, so you will have to double quote to have a quote inside these values.
Yeah, and that was why I didn't actually get exactly why name and email worked in the list without the quotes, because I saw them as strings. But yeah, fair enough.
So if I run this now, in fact, what will be executed is two commands. The first one will be to do the insert, and then we'll get the table. And now we have 4 rows. We have Bill that has been added. It's the first one here because it's ordered by name. So Bill is the first one. That's okay?
Mm-hmm.
Last thing is to delete content, and then we will get the table again, and we will execute the vacuum database. You don't see nothing as a result of this, but if you delete a large amount of data in your database, vacuum will shrink the database to get rid of the empty space. So you don't need to vacuum every time you do it, but I just show it to you to show how you can send a command like this one. But so that's the use of the vacuum. So exec delete is very similar to the insert. You do your query. In this case, I will delete from the list everything where the name is Bill. So the Bill that we added, we'll just remove it. We execute and we get an error if, let's say that I will just make an error here with just with the column name, and there's no such column as name XXX, but, oh yeah, Bill was gone because I'm always starting from a copy, so I will just remove it here, starting from a copy, and I will execute this one here to reinsert my Bill. Okay, so we have Bill here, and now I will exec the delete, and then we'll see the table again, and Bill won't be there. So there's an error because I still have my XXX. Bill is still there. Here. And Bill is gone. The vacuum command is just vacuum. Every SQL command has to be terminated with a semicolon. So it's something that if you forget, you will have an error message to tell you. And the vacuum is just this word, and it does a shrink of the database. I'm not an expert in this, but I found that because in quick access pop-up, I'm collecting data every minute. So there's a threshold where if the database is bigger than a given number of megs, there will be an automatic task that will just erase the oldest data. And then I have to use vacuum to put the database back to 3 meg because it could grow indefinitely, so I will not do that. So that's my first example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
Not too hard.
So,
Now,
okay.
let's play some music with the Beatles. There's no MP3 in my database, so we won't be able to listen to it. So what we do here is in fact, I will run it right now to show you what it does, and then we'll go through the details of that. So what it does first, it will open the database, the Beatles.db. This database does not exist yet. So here in this folder, that's where I'm running the script. There's no database, no .db. SQLite file is with the extension db. So here it will create the database. So what it did, it created this file here that has 0 bytes because it's a ready to be filled database, but it's completely empty. There's even no table in it, and there's no definition of nothing. So the second part will execute a command that will create a table and create an index. We'll return to the details of that later. But now you will see that this database now has 12 kilobytes. So there's no data, but there's the structure of the table and the columns in this file. And now the script is ready to import 256 lines from a text file to the database. and I will just say OK to run it. And now in 156 milliseconds, the 257 rows has been added to the database that now has the size of 36 kilobytes. That's good?
Yeah.
Next, we are ready now to get the table. So we'll use the get table command that we've seen in the first script to read the whole content, order by album name and then track number. And we will put it inside the list view. So we have here the content of the database. And if we take a look at this file here from the DB browser, so we have the file here. So we have more columns in the database than what I've put in my list view. Here in the list view, I'm putting only the track number, the album, and the name of the song. But we also have here the genre of the song, the total time, and the size of the file. If it's an MP3 file, in fact. So I'm selecting only the 3 columns that I want to show in my list view. So we'll see how this is done from the script. So first we create an instance of the SQL class to create the database variable, object variable. Here is the name of the file that contains the database. So for the first, if we change thing, I will always start from an empty file. Okay, so that's why I'm deleting the previous file if it's there. And then there's an import file. So it's a CSV file that is here. So it's a text file, comma separated with double quotes to enclose content that would contain commas or, so a standard CSV file. Just for fun, I will show you another tool I built, which is CSV Buddy that we talked about previously. So it's opening a CSV file. So this is only to process the text file itself. But now what we do instead is that we are reading this file to import it inside the SQL tree, the SQL database. So that's the path to the file. And then I'm just creating a variable here to test if the database file exists. So if it exists, we will not create it. We will not add the definition of table. So that's our first message here. I will just rerun it. So ready to open database, we are here. We are here, and then we open the database, which will be an empty database. That's the first part. Second part, if the database is new, because it was not existing before, I have to create the structure of my database. If it is not new, I will skip it because it's already done. And what could be done in an else statement? So if it already exists, I could run something that will alter the file. I could add columns, I could change things, and I could add indexes in the file if it already exists. But now it does not exist, so I will create the database. And the SQL command to do that is create table. I'm using if not exist, which is not necessary in this case because it's a new file, but I just prefer to let it there when I create a file. So if it exists already, it's not recreated. So it's a SQL option that you have here. So it's not really necessary, but create table songs, and then the list of column in my database. So an integer that will be used as primary key as an ID, so I can show it to you that this column here. By the way, this tool here is allow you to sort the content of your database by any column. It also allows to filter. If I say I want only rock here, I have only the songs that are rock. So that's how you can also check if your content is good in the database. So for now, I will. So I'm creating a table with the ID, the name, the album, the track number, which is an integer, the genre, total time integer, and size integer. You see integer or integer?
Integer.
Sure, sure. Okay, I was okay. So that's the first statement here. In the same variable string SQL, I'm adding a new line with a second command that can be sent at the same time. So when I will use the exec command here, the string can contain multiple commands.
Hmm.
They just need to be separated by a semicolon. And it's cleaner to make it a new line also. So here the second command is create index if it not exists. That will be named iname, and it will be an index on the songs column name. So the reason for doing it in a small database, it makes no difference. But in a very large database, if I know that I will often have to sort by a name or to filter or to group, or let's say group by album, to make the grouping more efficient when you use a very large database, it's good to create an index on the fields that will be used to sort or group. So in this example here, I'm only creating an index on the name column. And if I, in the browser here, if I go in the database structure tab, it shows me what has been created. So there's a song table that has been created. Inside this song, here are the columns that I created. And it also created an index. It says indices, and this index of the name for the column name. Here is the query that created the index, and here is the query that created the table. You could also create views and triggers. I don't know what it is, but views is a way to make a predefined set of columns and sorting and grouping that you can remember. So when you go to browse your data here, what I have here is the table, but if you have multiple tables, it will be available here. And if you create views, it will also be available in this list here. So you can browse the full content of your table or just predefined views if you prefer. Being here, I will just mention that there's this button here that is very important. It refreshes the data in the selected table. So if I run something in the script and I want to check the result, I don't have to reload the database. I can stay in the database and just hit refresh to see the changes that I've done in the script. So we are here in the command that will create the table and the index. It is sent to the class that returns an error if something goes wrong. And where are we in the script? So we are in the else here. So I didn't want to do that. So let me just finish it. I will just file delete. Yeah, here we go. Just delete. Okay, it was not deleting the file. This command here was not deleting the file because the database was open in my browser.
Oh.
Okay, so it was preventing the deletion of the file. So that's why it was going in my else. The else is doing an alteration to the database. We'll see it later. But for now, we are just here at open the database, create the table and the index. And then we are at this step here, where we import. So the code to do that is here. In fact, we have to build a very large, very long command. All this here, insert value into songs, etc., and all the songs here. It's one line. It's one string, in fact. Okay, with multiple lines in it. So the beginning is insert into the table songs into the column name, album, track number, genre, total size, and size, the values, and then we have a loop that will go into the text file to read every line of the text file and add the lines that you see on the right side here. For each line, it starts with a parenthesis, and then the content of the first column, the content of the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth. and then closing parenthesis and comma. That's the first line, and then the second line until the next comma, and the third line, etc. So it's built here. So after the insert, we have the command here that is dot equal. So it is adding the parenthesis, and then it is adding for each field in the CSV file. So it is parsing the CSV file one line at a time. Excuse me. This is parsing the CSV file one line at a time, and this is parsing one line for every column in this line. So the first time it will arrive at the first line, first column, it will read A. Jude, Sgt. Pepper's. That's the first value, and Lonely Hearts Club Band. Okay, that's the first. The album name is A. Jude, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and you see there's a quote, an apostrophe here at Sgt. Pepper's. It has to be escaped. It has to be doubled, because if it's not double, it will be interpreted as the end of the value. Okay, so that's why in my code here, I have a function that will escape the content of every field in case there are some apostrophes to double quote. So this command here is just at the bottom here. It's here. In fact, it will put the opening and closing quotes, and will double the quotes inside the value. That's my escape string. I said my escape string because in the class, there is a command to do the escape, but it was not working. So there's something I'm doing wrong, or I don't know. But in fact, all what you need to do is just to replace the quotes by double quotes and put quotes at the beginning, at the end. So I've done it myself, but it's very easy to do it. So
hey, Jean.
Yeah.
There was a question about the triggers, using triggers, and it sounds like he knows that. Do you know? I've never used triggers, but it sounds like basically you can have, if you set up a connection between the two different tables and tell it one is a trigger to the other, it will automatically know that it needs to go recalculate something if that other data gets updated. Have you ever used triggers?
No, I really know nothing about triggers. I can just imagine something like if a table goes with more than the number of rows, it will trigger an action that you could program, but I really don't know how to do it with SQLite, even with the, I just know that I have some people I work with that were doing actions. I don't remember the name. There's a name for an action that you can program, a kind of predefined, or scripting, a kind of scripting that you can do in SQL, not SQLite, but in SQL database. But no, I couldn't help on that.
Which the other thing we probably should have mentioned earlier is there's I don't know how many, but there are different flavors, quote unquote, of SQL.
Yeah.
Right? Slightly different versions of it that, depending when you're trying to run your SQL query, make sure you look for the SQLite and use its syntax, because for the most part, there's a ton of overlap. The same to the saying.
Yeah, and there's a link here that I had posted. There's a documentation very well done on the SQLite.org website, and you have a link to this command here, create trigger. And there's an answer to every question. When you Google something about SQLite, it will always take you to this site because it's there. That's the place to get the answers on how to do things. And there's a lot of tutorials also that you will find with examples of SQLite commands.
Yeah. And then Ahmed gave us a link to triggers under SQLite. If I don't know, we necessarily want to go through it, but for those that are interested, the other thing I'd say is we're hitting up a bit over the first hour. Why don't I just go ahead and pause or stop the recording, and then we'll start it again. So we're kind of equally breaking them up. I have a couple questions, simple ones, which we want to jump. One question. Let me go ahead and do this part here. So stop recording.